1 Kings 3 and 4, 2 Chronicles 1, and Psalm 72. The Hebrew pronunciation of Solomon is Shlomo. You've heard of the word peace in Hebrew. The word Shlomo is simply the idea of shalom put into a adjectival form. Peaceful. His very name means peaceful one. He again is the second son of David and Bathsheba, the first son after their marriage. He's about 16 to 18 when he assumes the throne. We think he'll have a co-regency with David for a little bit. He does not ascend the throne of his own accord, at least that's not how the text describes it. It has his mother, Bathsheba, being the forceful hand behind this, reminding David of the promise he apparently had made to make Solomon the king. His reign is 40 years long, and so as we listen in, and I'd like to splice together some of the passages we read, in fact, as we listen into the kingdom of Solomon, this is probably an accounting of maybe 20, 30 years of time. God endowed Solomon with wisdom and discernment in great measure, with understanding as vast as the sands of the seashore. He was the wisest of all men. His fame spread among all the surrounding nations. He composed 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. He discoursed about trees and about beasts, birds and creeping things, and fish. All the kings of the earth came to hear Solomon's wisdom. Of course, more than just wisdom or proverbial thinking, where you want the person to think, oh yeah, that makes great sense. I wish I had thought of it that simply. That's the purpose of a proverb, and we'll get to those. But he was also encyclopedic in his knowledge, and that, of course, is the privilege of wealth and time, because the gathering of information in this society would take time and money. Well, speaking of wealth, more verses. All King Solomon's, all of his drinking cups were of gold, and silver did not count to anything in Solomon's days. The king excelled all the kings of the earth in wealth and in wisdom. He had a Tarshish fleet of ships on the sea, and once every 3 years the fleet came in, bearing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Now there's something to add to our mental image of his throne room. The king made silver as plentiful in Jerusalem as stones. That leans into the eventual running joke in Israel that when all the angels during the opening days of creation were supposedly sent around the earth with jobs to do, the one that had the rocks to distribute around the earth, his bag broke over the land of Israel because it's stones everywhere. And that's what it was like to live in Israel at this time when it came to how common silver was, let's say. That kind of explanation, of course, is in comparison to what they've had with Saul and David. So living as an Israelite, they've never had it so good. And that's clearly how the text wants us to understand it. Well, as we conclude, just a few more verses. Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sands of the sea. They ate and drank and were content. Solomon's rule extended over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines and the boundary of Egypt. They brought Solomon tribute and were subject to him all his life. Well, we know that Saul had his struggles with Yahweh. David had his struggles with passion and even cruelty, I would say, on the battlefield. We are listening to this wondering, could it ever get, well, obviously, could it ever get better? But is there any chink in the armor? Is there ever going to be a problem that we run across? And this will be 10 chapters of 1 Kings, the first 10 chapters, and then all of the sudden, and we're going to get there, of course, and talk about it specifically, but I want to leave us with one line, really, that makes us wonder how this could happen to a man. It says in chapter 11, and we'll get there, that the heart, and that's again the decision-making part of the person in Hebrew thinking, the heart of Solomon was not shalem. Shalem. Now that's a play on words. Shalomo was not shalem with Yahweh, and then it does add this word here, his Elohim. This will be our greatest challenge to date, I would say, in understanding how loyalty works in the heart of an individual. We'll have a man who has plenty of background with what it means to understand who Yahweh is. But then there will be that struggle in chapter 11 to come, where the text just stops and says, here was what Solomon struggled with. His decision-making wasn't peaceful when it came to his God. So let's see what that means.